Happy Pride.
Oh my gosh, is that what this rainbow on my shirt is for?
That's a rainbow?
Yeah. Listen, you leave my faded pastel rainbow alone.
Thank you so much for coming back to Extra Human. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Garrett.
My name is Michael.
And together we are Extra Human, and we're all about gay shit on this channel. Who's there?
Oh, that's Mochi right here. And this is our pit bull, Bella.
Oh, hi, babies. Anyway, we would be terrible gays if we did not do a Pride video, so here we are. There's been a lot of
discourse
about Pride lately, and I feel like we should probably weigh in on that a little bit, and we can let the fur babies weigh in on it too.
I don't believe Bella is being bad. She's not a malicious dog. Mochi, however, is the smallest smallest animal in the house. She's very shy, and so Bella likes to try and sniff her, and Mochi punches her in the face.
What? Oh no.
All right, everybody out. Everybody. We're gonna talk about Pride, baby!
Yes.
Just you and me!
We're super excited about Pride, this year especially.
Despite the hyper, yeah, we gotta get, the gay, you're gay, LGBT.
We're always here for it. We're always here for the big gay energy. But it comes around every year, kind of like Christmas these days. There's a whole marketing season around it now. It's become something different from how it started, certainly, and even different from how it was just 5-10 years ago. Despite how much progress seems to have been made in the last few years regarding LGBT representation, visibility, rights, etc., it's still, this year especially, it feels a lot like a battle against, normative straight society this year. Yeah. So I've been wanting to talk about it, but I also want to talk about it in a way that isn't framed around, the 4chan-y straight talking points. I don't know about y'all, but I'm already super tired of the kink at Pride discourse, cops at Pride discourse, all the different discourses individually, I'm tired of. I feel like we don't look at this in a broad enough sense of what is even Pride? Why do we have it? Why is it the way that it is? And how has it changed over time? Because our current conception of Pride and newcomers' conception of Pride is kind of removed from how it was.
Every generational gap is going to have that, unfortunately. We're a community with heritage, history, and culture.
Yes.
But you may or may not be born into it. If you're not born to a family
usually you're not.
Yeah, it has to be learned every single time because it can't just, we don't teach it.
The opportunities to learn about it are kind of few. You definitely have to go looking for them. It's good that that's kind of changing with the ascendancy of Pride, but at the same time, as it ascends, there's a lot of susceptibility in the history of it to get watered down.
Yeah.
How Black History Month has kind of...
it was Martin Luther King, always.
Malcolm X was the bad guy, Martin Luther King was the good guy, Rosa Parks sat on a bus, and that was the civil rights movement, that's it. Guys.
And then that solved racism.
The same kind of phenomenon, I think, is very much a present threat to Pride as well. There's a risk, I think, of the history and message of Pride being watered down by people from outside of that movement.
I know we introduced our names already, but people come in and out of our channel all the time. We're getting new subs all the time, which we are so appreciative of. If this is your first serious video by us, consider giving us a subscribe because although this video will be slightly lacking in comedy, I think you'll like it and you should stick around. For those of you who are new, we're going to dive into our personal backgrounds just real quick, who we are and how we identify.
Because if we're going to have a discussion about this, y'all probably should know where we're coming from and where in the LGBT spectrum we kind of sit. Michael, what are you? How do you identify? Tell us.
Well, it all began back in the distant year of 1992. I'm just kidding. So I'm Michael. I am 29 years old now. I came out as trans, I think, when I was 26. Yesterday would have been my 6 or 7 month auntie.
Congratulations.
Sexually, I identify as a bisexual or pansexual person, but I mostly prefer dudes. How about you, Garrett? What are you? What do you identify as?
Well, I'm...
Other than a sex machine.
Oh, stop. Oh, stop. I'm Garrett. I I'm Garrett. I turned 30 a couple months ago, and I identify as gay, non-binary. You know, I've always loved dudes. It's just, you know, the fact of it.
Me and dudes have a complicated relationship.
I'm sure, quite. But like, you know, who doesn't have a complex relationship with dudes? Gay has always been closer to the center of my identity because that was the big one that I struggled with coming out about when I was like 14, 15. Only within the last few years have I identified as non-binary, and that's come mostly as just a result of me questioning, like, what is even masculinity? What is gender? Like, how much of this is really intrinsic? I did that thing where you look deep inside yourself and you're like, what gender do I really feel like? Masculinity feels like such an imposition to me. It's gotta be not man, right? But I look inside myself and I don't really find anything. I look inside me and there's an abyss, a void. And I'm like, well, that's not a gender, is it? So I'm non-binary, I guess.
I can relate to that so hard. With our journeys never really ending, like self-discovery and so on and so forth.
It's a lifelong thing.
What are some of the things that you've done throughout the years to help feel more of a connection to your LGBT roots, so to speak?
That's a wonderful question. I guess the first step was recognizing that there were LGBT roots at all. Even though it may feel like you're the only gay person in the world, it turns out that you're not, and there are a bunch of other people that are gay too, even ones that are your own age, even ones that you could even talk to. Crazy, right?
What?
The most concrete way that I discovered other gay people at first was through Day of Silence at my school.
I remember that.
Because it was only ever the gay kids or like the really tight allies who would ever do Day of Silence. For those of you who don't know, Day of Silence is a yearly protest that is held in April. So it's not technically a pride thing, but it is pride adjacent because it's, you know, it's the queers that are doing it. You take a vow of silence for the day in order to sort of, by contrast, amplify the voices of those who cannot speak. It's a very visible thing. Like, even if you're not like very visible as a gay person normally, or like if you don't know the other signs, you know, it's not as obvious back then. Like, you could look at a person who's like in punk or emo attire and you're like, oh, they're just punk or emo, but they're doing Day of Silence. And it's like, oh, are you gay too? Are you gay? Oh my God, I'm gay too, and I'm not supposed to be talking, but I'm gay too. Like, that's where I first got the sense of there are more of us and we have strength in numbers and we have a movement behind us.
That was actually one of my first experiences in college as well, was National Day of Silence. It was an out of the closet event. And so our school would build, to describe it as anything other than rickety and slightly hazardous would be a lie. We basically built a closet outside. We covered it in craft paper. Inside, you would write messages either to your closeted self, to other closeted peers. You just write messages of hope and show people that they're not alone. And once you were done crying in the closet, you would go out the other side.
I love that. I love that as a visual metaphor too, like building a big old closet.
We would share It Does Get Better. Do you remember that campaign?
Yeah, and I remember being glad that that existed because like I was already out for a good while by that time. Because that campaign got so huge, it was definitely a sign to me that like, oh, we are gaining mainstream acceptance because this is getting blown up. It was an interesting time when a bunch of other stuff was happening, like shows were getting gayer, trans people were becoming a hell of a lot more visible. Like, remember that Time magazine cover, the transgender tipping point? It's got Laverne Cox on it, and like Lady Gaga was huge and she was talking us up.
First of all, I actually was the opposite of you with the It Gets Better campaign. I used to hate that phrase. Yeah, it gets fucking better. Like, I always have thought it's belittling to another person's issues. It took me so long to be like, yeah, no, it does get better. But like, yeah, that was something that helped me realize we're becoming more mainstream.
With the increased mainstreaming of gay people and trans people, it's been kind of a double-edged sword because with more mainstream attention comes the more mainstream capitalist shit that tends to follow. We're being advertised to a lot more.
And I find that it culminates at things like Pride events, like when we finally get to the point in the month where it's like, oh, it's finally Christmas. Oh, it's finally time for the Pride Parade. Yeah. That's when you get all of the ads. Have you ever been to Pride?
I've been to Pride twice, both times in Los Angeles too.
Oh, that's awesome. Me being a bad gay, I've actually never been to Pride. I have kicked my own ass a couple times because I have missed some very, very cool prides. For example, I lived in Seattle. Macklemore was at that one. I will never forgive myself. I actually have a lot of trouble going to Pride because of accessibility reasons. My disabilities are invisible. I'm very, very open about my health problems. I have a plethora of conditions. I am neurodivergent. I have a disability called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Postural meaning the position of your body, orthostatic meaning standing up, tachycardia means my heart loses its freaking mind, and syndrome, syndromes. If I go from sitting to standing, or if I go from laying down to sitting and then standing, there is a very high chance that I will faint. And so it gets worse during the summer because I start to get dehydrated because POTS dehydrates you. And then on top of that, when I get dehydrated, if I can't hold my liquids in, my heart rate will shoot all the way to 200. That's really not safe. And I can't even walk at that point. And so things like Pride aren't accessible to me because there aren't things like shade. There aren't often public bathrooms. That's not even getting into the crappier side of things that no one has control over, which is noise sensitivity that I have and being very overwhelmed in crowds. But that's my own. Those are things that are going to be a lot harder to change.
But still, it's a real thing that keeps you away from Pride
It really
events.
sucks. I wish that we could have a neurodivergent Pride day. Come to our quiet disco. Let's have a quiet Pride disco.
I feel like that has to be a thing at least somewhere. If not, it definitely should be.
So accessibility is a large part of why I haven't been able to go. However, because I haven't been able to go in the last few years, I have been out of the loop on how Pride has really, really changed. How was Pride different in the last few years, especially last year? Because last year, even I know, Pride was very different in LA.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly the kind of person who's been super involved in local Pride events and stuff. I went to 2 of them and I didn't even go to the paid events,
went for the free stuff, man. That's all that matters.
I went clubbing a few times and saw the parade a couple times, but I still am very invested in the overall conversation around Pride because the conversation itself is very meaningful. Pride events themselves, they're fun, they're celebratory, they give you a chance to be out and queer and be there and be authentic.
Yeah, I think that's the part that I end up loving the most anyway.
But the most important function of Pride is to get that conversation going and get people talking about the place that we deserve in society.
Human rights, basically.
Yeah, trying to advance our cause, the gay agenda. So we've come a long way from the late 2000s. So it's been trending for a while now that there's been increasing acceptance for Pride and everything. And that's brought so much more corporate influence. There have been more cops at more Prides. And we run up into 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020. To go over it again, COVID shut everything down. Los Angeles was very much so locked down because we're a big city. Our healthcare system can only handle so much, so the lockdowns were definitely necessary for us. It was basically impossible to have a typical Pride because all sorts of gatherings were not allowed, right? But people were protesting that summer were the George Floyd protests. And there's this huge focus on the issue of police brutality against people of color, particularly Black people. And at the intersection of that, trans people of color, Black trans women in particular, last year, Los Angeles Pride was completely handed over to the local BLM chapter to run and organize. What would have been the usual Pride parade became a genuine protest.
Yes.
It was a march throughout the city. It was huge, by the way. You can look up footage of this. There's drone shots of the entirety of Hollywood Boulevard just filled up with people.
I watched it on Snapchat.
There. It was real.
It was insane. Do you remember when you were sending me videos of the National Guard lining up military vehicles along Hollywood Boulevard?
Yeah. Los Angeles got really militarized for a while. The National Guard didn't really do much of anything. They were clearly there to just be a show of force, but the cops were definitely on super high alert. And it was also that year that I found out the police eat up about half of LA's budget. Crazy how much money we give to the police here. The difference difference between last year and this year is astounding. Like last year, it was a very truly socially conscious thing, and brands wouldn't touch it.
They wouldn't.
It was not corporatized. You know, it was about all the shit that they're usually trying to cover up. Last year, it was completely thrown in our face. It's thrown in everyone's face. The fact that racism is not over. Systemic inequality and oppression is a very real occurrence. People die due to the police all the time, and the people that die are Black, and often, you know, like there's another like intersection in there too. There's real systemic violence against people who do not fit the white, cis, straight idealization of mainstream society.
Okay.
And that's not something that brands want to touch. They want to pretend that everything is fine and happy, that racism is over, bigotry is cured, everything is happiness and rainbows, and love who you love. Just don't show up with kink at Pride or something like that, you know?
Yeah, don't show up with kink at Pride. Don't be gay. Don't be gay. Don't be gay at Pride. Being gay at Pride is illegal.
Don't be gay at Pride. I swear, though, it wouldn't take much to get to that point either.
For
like,
real.
That is actually one of my biggest fears regarding Pride, is that it would be one day completely straightwashed by capitalist normative forces, and it just becomes a celebration of love and being who you are without any memory whatsoever of the struggle and the push to accept real difference.
That feels very real. At first I was like, that wouldn't happen. And then you started describing that. I'm like, yup, all right, you win this round.
But like, just look at how it is this year. Like, contrast it with last year. Everybody, and by everybody, I mean like mainstream corporate media and society, are trying so hard to pretend like last year didn't happen. Trying so hard to pretend Pride isn't actually about justice, making sure that we don't die, making sure that we're not oppressed, making sure that people who have control in society actually recognize us and aren't stepping all over us. But those same forces, speaking through corporations and advertisement, are insisting that it's not. It feels like Pride is being slowly taken away from us, and we're being alienated from Pride, or Pride is being alienated from us because it's being mainstream assimilated so much.
Yeah.
I'm good with words, I promise.
Mainstream assimilated is actually a really good description.
Something I want to say about this entire video right now, we do joke around a lot, and that is our forte. Talking about this stuff in a serious capacity is not necessarily what we're normally good at. So like, take everything that we're saying with a grain of salt. Don't let us be the only people that you listen to on this subject, because I know other people could say it better than we could. The reason why I wanted to talk about it all is because I have not seen this be discussed yet.
Yeah.
And it freaking disturbs me, the idea that we'll completely forget the lessons of last year.
I have yet to see anybody talk about last year. Like any LGBT creators.
It bugs me so much. It seems to have completely faded from public memory. Like, we're so eager to forget that last year ever happened. But we can't. We mustn't.
I worry about the things I say because this is the internet and anything can happen and anyone can misconstrue words. But the reason I started this channel with you was so we could talk about LGBT issues. And that means even talking about things that we may not completely understand, we want to try and make sure that it gets brought up. And something that needs to be brought up is when Pride gets corporatized, it becomes just like anything else that gets corporatized, it gets increasingly harder and harder to speak your mind on that topic. You cannot, because you will lose those contracts. You will lose that support. You will lose that money. When Pride was turned over to BLM, we saw that in freaking action. We saw that. People pulling out of it. The only time we saw corporations treat the BLM movement the way they treat Pride is when everyone did that social media blackout. What is the point of that? There isn't support in that. So you've got media and corporations not wanting to participate because it's not financially viable. And then you've got the other side of the community from last year going, well, the trial is over. Racism is solved again. And we can just focus on corporatized, rainbow capitalist Pride. We can go right back into it. And that really frustrates me more than I thought it would. before we even started this video, Garrett asks me, do we want to wear rainbows for this? Because I feel like wearing rainbows is just going to negate our point.
It feels like we're buying into rainbow capitalism by doing this, but like, no, it was our symbol first.
Christianity has entered the chat to throw bitch fit.
But you know, that's what we do, right? That's how the engine of culture works, right? Cultural innovation and the growth of new symbols begins at the fringes, and then as it's subsumed into the center, into advertising and everything else, we more or less have to abandon those symbols and come up with newer, better ones, which, you know, is why I think it's a super good thing, actually, that we have, like, how many different variants of the pride flag now?
Yeah.
Give them all.
There is a reason that we have so many diverse flags. That's why we have the trans flag, the lesbian flag, variants of the lesbian flag, the gay flag.
I thought the gay flag was still just the rainbow flag, though.
Actually, no, there is a flag for gay masked individuals.
Oh, it's blues. I should... This feels so old hat to me now. I don't want to... I can't believe I did not know about this flag until just this very moment. I'm changing my colors right the fuck now.
That's amazing. I don't feel like a lot of people know about that.
People only ever see the rainbow one.
It's all rainbows, baby.
It's become kind of a monolith to people outside of, you know, at least our own actual community. I think there's hope to be had. There's a very clear pushback against that. I think it's very healthy that we continue that and we try to amplify more marginalized voices and tell the corporations their place.
Yeah, for real.
In all this.
I think that, nope, I think nothing, apparently. Hold on. I feel like stuff like that is going to be weirdly hard for some people. People like me, for example, I didn't think that rainbow capitalism was a big deal. I was like, okay, and what? Who cares? But like, when you study the history of it, like we just talked about, and like when you talk about like just the recent events, I really, really fucking hope we push back. Keep pushing back. Don't give up. Don't stop. And remember, stay extra.
Stay extra, guys.